Okay, we can go ahead and get started. And thanks to our panelists for joining us today, and for our moderators. We had just a fantastic. If you weren't here for the first two panels, they went extremely well. And I encourage you to watch the recording that will be available within a week or so up on the NPA's resource library for a very rich discussion on both an introduction to accessibility and inclusion, as well as a deeper dive into the barriers that are faced, especially within the academic framework for postdocs and beyond. And we're now at our third panel, Pathways to Greater Accessibility and Inclusion for Postdocs with Disabilities. So after the discussion we just heard focused on barriers, our attention is now turning more towards those pathways forward. Of course, the pathways and the barriers are very intricately linked, but we're trying to understand the possibilities that are there, as well as the obstacles that may occur on the way in heading down those pathways. It's my pleasure to introduce Melissa Nguyen to you. Melissa has over 25 years of professional experience in both the academic and nonprofit sectors. She's currently the program officer for the Board on Higher Education and Workforce at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, or NASEM. She's responsible for several STEM projects related to graduate and professional students, postdocs, faculty, and administrators. She's also focused on the needs of individuals with socially constructed identities, such as in race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexual orientation, people with disabilities, and others who face institutionalized bias in the academy. So I'm happy to turn it over to Melissa to get us going on our third panel.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of this NPA Equity Summit, where we're going to discuss pathways to greater accessibility and inclusion for postdocs with disabilities. As Tom said, I am Melissa Nguyen. I am a middle-aged Black woman with shoulder-length brown hair and glasses. I am wearing a white shirt and a wine-colored print blazer, and I am honored to serve as the moderator for this afternoon's session. Some quick housekeeping reminders. Participants should remain muted, and we respectfully ask that you keep your cameras off during the session to maintain our bandwidth. This session is being recorded and will be made available later on the NPA website. As I believe Logan mentioned in a previous session, we are going to touch on some sensitive topics for some, so please don't hesitate to reach out to your postdoc office or another appropriate office to take advantage of their help and resources, because that is what they are there for. If you have specific questions for the presenters, please enter them using the Q&A or chat function. And in the interest of time, we're going to address our questions at the end. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers for this session. Today, we're joined by both Dr. Lisa Yates and Dr. Kathleen Mittendorf. Dr. Yates uses she, her pronouns and serves community college students who manage disabilities, stigma, and access as director of the Moreno Valley College Accessibility Resource Center in Southern California. Lisa completed her Ph.D. in higher education leadership for changing populations through Notre Dame of Maryland University in 2023. With a mixed methods dissertation that explored how experiential learning can be utilized to positively impact disability perception in community college. Lisa's postdoctoral work continues to explore disability perception in relation to disability disclosure, the intersectionality of ableism and racism, as well as college autism. Dr. Kathleen, or Kate, as we know them better, Mittendorf uses them, they pronouns, and is a research assistant professor in the Division of Hematology Oncology at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. They are interdisciplinary scientists whose work focuses on the various interactions of cancer biology, genomics, health informatics, and health information technology, and equitable healthcare delivery. They dedicate their volunteer and faculty service time to improving equity and inclusivity of STEM education and workplaces with special foci on disability and LGBTQ equity. We're first going to start with a presentation from Dr. Yates and then move to Dr. Mittendorf's presentation. I asked that both of you please provide a visual description of yourself. And with that, Dr. Yates, you have the floor.
Hi, I'm going to share my presentation. And here, everybody see that? Yes. So, good afternoon. As she said, my name is Lisa Yates, and I am an African-American cisgender woman with light brown skin and different shades of gray curly braids. And I'm wearing a burgundy top with kind of creamy lacy shoulders. And I'm really excited and happy to have been invited to present on postdocs with disabilities in professional environments. A little bit about me that wasn't shared already. I have cultivated my professional experience in the California Community College system, where I've served students as an adjunct learning disability specialist, student success counselor, veterans counselor, autism specialist, and I served the disability diaspora for 6 years and as an academic advisor. And then 2 years ago, I accepted a position as director in a Southern California community college disability support program. At the end of that year, which was very challenging, I completed my PhD with a qualitative study about disability perception. And this journey changed me from a disability rights advocate to a disability justice scholar and champion. In my ongoing research, I'm finding that disability definitions and worldviews vary widely. And so I think it's important to contextualize my disability philosophy because our worldview is shaped by environment, experiences, and beliefs, and these influence the language we use. While my language reflects a philosophy honed from working with the disability diaspora and from managing my own chronic condition, fibromyalgia, I understand that the disabled community is diverse and includes those who identify as disabled and those who don't. And so I typically use language that reflects the complexity of identities within the disability diaspora. But I personally shared the perspective of disability scholar and advocate Tom Shakespeare, who identifies as disabled. Shakespeare writes that disabilities are a type of human predicament and that we all push through a variety of predicaments as human beings. He defines predicaments as situations we may wish to minimize but can't avoid. Human predicaments are multifaceted, but individuals with body-mind predicaments not only manage symptoms, we have to also push through stigma, discrimination, and exclusion as well. In my qualitative research, I always ask my participants some form of identity question, and their responses confirm that culturally accepted ableism informs perceptions of disability, and disability identity is positively or negatively impacted by the cultural expectation that disabled individuals will adapt to a world not designed for them. So disabled people are expected to empathize with the discomfort of non-disabled people and adapt to the world, to their world. But the burden of empathy shouldn't be theirs alone. The notion of double empathy suggests that the non-disabled world should cultivate empathy and learn to adapt as well. Academia seems like a good place to start this work because many PhD graduates work in higher education, and academia's competition, adjunct workloads, performance evaluations, and looming deadlines impact disabled postdoc educators who have to navigate professional expectations that value and reward normative ways of being. Not surprisingly, disabled postdocs are underrepresented in full professorships, administration, and postdoc research. All of this causes higher stress in the workplace. Workplace stress intensifies symptoms and causes flare-ups, which heightens the stress, intensifying the symptoms even more. And this cycle can lead to frequent absences and hospitalizations. In Academic Ableism, author J. Dolmage describes how universities create sickness, and he blames academia's hierarchical structure, measurements, and standards for perpetuating ableism. In a hierarchical organization, everyone cannot be on the top, and those on the bottom are usually adjunct and those whose performance measurements fall outside of the institution's normative expectations. Borrowing from a recent UCLA webinar on neurodivergence, Josh Chow discussed the costs of oppression. Chow says that in academia, successful neurodivergent individuals like himself develop adaptive strategies like masking symptoms and behaviors that are natural to the individual but discomforting to their peers. This allows them to pass as normal and eventually assimilate into the organizational culture. But all of that comes at a cost. These might be personal, causing them to question who they are, wonder about their value, and ultimately how they fit into the institution and the world. Another cost is developing new physiological symptoms that may affect mental health. And all of this impacts the emotional state, causing self-doubt, fatigue, worry, and loss of authentic self. One type of ableism that's not discussed openly is saneism. Saneism is socially accepted neurodiscrimination, antagonism, or exclusion of neurodivergent people because of the belief that neurotypical cognition is superior. It may be unspoken, but the message is clear that postdocs with psychiatric disabilities must silence their symptoms and their way of being, even though one Australian study found that mental health predicaments were 3 to 4 times higher in academia compared to the general population. And a UC Berkeley study found that 47% of graduate students managed depression, while a British study found that 53% of academics had some type of psychiatric disability. Interestingly, Harvard's Coach study surveyed faculty and found that only 7.2% reported having a disability, with mental health predicaments making up the largest group at 28%. The researchers estimated that at least a quarter of the faculty did not disclose their disability, and we can imagine how the competitive and rigorous Harvard workplace might discourage disability disclosure and how saneism might play a role. So what can institutions do to support disabled faculty and staff? Some of this has already been discussed in previous panels, but in a 2023 book published by the Association of Higher Education and Disability, or AHED, disabled faculty and staff stressed that institutions must examine biases and expectations and ensure that exclusionary practices don't perpetuate ableism and unintentionally discriminate against disabled employees. They said institutions should conduct surveys to examine disability perception, both at the individual level and the institutional level. And after surveying, they should use the data. They should do something with the data. Use it to intentionally unlearn disability biases and to promote allyship, removing the burden of advocacy and adapting from the disabled employee. And as it's been stated today, institutions should meet disabled postdocs where they are. They can set individualized expectations instead of departmental or institutional goals. Next, institutions should create a sense of belonging because, like students, disabled faculty want to feel like they belong. One of my study participants said that colleagues stopped inviting her to activities because of her post-chemotherapy status. Institutions can establish mentorships between seasoned disability positive faculty and newer disabled faculty to help them navigate the organizational challenges and biases and to familiarize them with the supports available. Zebediah Hall points out that belonging and mattering start with who can participate. Disabled staff and faculty need access to participate for the opportunity to thrive so that disabled students can also thrive. Representation matters. Disabled students need to see educators who manage disabilities thriving as well. Additionally, academia needs to learn from colleagues with disabilities about their disability journey. An environment that values knowledge and research should foster a community of learning about disability that includes disabled experts in the conversation. And we need to challenge ableist conceptions about academic rigor. In that UCLA webinar I attended, one speaker said, when you're a fish out of water, when you're a fish out of water, you can teach the whole world to swim. We learn the most from those who have knowledge and experience that we don't have. And as long as they're willing to teach and we're willing to learn, our perspectives can be cleansed and our lives can be enriched by difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yates. I think in the interest of time, we're going to move to Dr. Mittendorf's presentation, and then we'll take our questions and answers at the end. Dr.
Understood.
Mittendorf?
Sure, we can do that. I am going to start by sharing my screen and then hitting the button that lets you, see the presentation. Okay. So this is Kate speaking. My pronouns are they, them. I am becoming middle-aged, unfortunately. I am an androgynous white person with short auburn hair, and I'm in a blue shirt with a black and white turtleneck collar. I identify as autistic and chronically ill. And as disabled, I have a severe systemic disease that causes multiple physical disabilities, which are both visible and invisible. I will try to use a mixture of disabled and people with disabilities, which is what I typically do to try to reflect multiple perspectives. Sometimes I accidentally fall back on disabled when I'm talking, so I will try though. So I just want to give a brief outline of my talk first. The first two major bullet points I'm going to go through quite quickly because I think they were covered very well in both Lisa's talk and in the previous sessions before together. But I do want to set them up in sort of my framing so that when we talk about actionable strategies, they'll be there. So just as a brief outline, I want to start by talking about allyship and reframing our disability mindset. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some existing models of disability and how they play out. And then I'm going to talk about the accommodations process itself as sort of a reactive process versus a more ideal proactive process, and how the accommodations practice actually participates in disabling individuals. And then I want to talk about how do we become access accomplices, or if you are a disabled person and you're just looking to bring some action items back to your DEI committees or help them become accomplices. Hopefully these will still help you. And everything is pretty high level because of time constraints, but I think these slides will be available afterward. And I have a bunch of references at the end for anyone who might want to delve deeper. And also, if you go to my website, which is just my name, katemittendorf.com, I have a whole bunch on there as well. So just to start out framing us, I think we've talked a lot today about how disability has been culturally framed as a defect to be cured. In sociology, they call that the medical model of disability, which you may have heard of. It's by far the most prevalent model that plays out in society here. And it's especially prevalent, I think, in the STEM world, especially in the sort of biomedical sciences, which is where I'm situated. So I think that creates a lot of problematic views of individuals with disabilities. And a model that sought to address that is the social model, which frames disability as due to societal or structural barriers to access. That's like things like, if there was a ramp here, I could access this building just fine, but if there's only stairs, I can't access it all. That's how the social model is pointing out that environment disables you, not necessarily the fact that you use a wheelchair. But there were some critiques of this from within the disability community, especially the chronic illness community, because the social model is very anti-cure in many ways in how it plays out, and there are people who experience great pain, including myself, from our chronic illnesses. And the social relational model acknowledges the importances of individual personal experiences, such as pain, and how we frame disability around an individual. The social political model was another attempt to address it, and it ascribes, it acknowledges the political nature of disability identity, and has a reframing of disability as politically situated with core values related to principles of disability justice. If you're interested in those, I think I linked them at the end, but do look up the 10 principles of disability justice. I guarantee you'll find them, and you will see how they have a political relationship with our world today. So I guess the only thing I don't want to dwell on this too long because we've talked about it a lot, but I just want to place in your mind as we move forward, even if you're disabled yourself, how has the prevalence of the medical model influenced how you conceptualize either your own disabled identity or disability identity, or other individuals with disabilities? So for instance, I'm not immune to saneism just because I have another disability. So, it's something I reflect on a lot, is my relationship to mental wellness and mental illness as it, relates to my sociocultural upbringing. So, I think it's a really important thing for us to reflect, not only if we have a disability ourselves, but also if we're trying to be a good ally. These have already been beautifully extensively covered, especially in the last session, but just to frame them in sort of the way that I talk about them, barriers to access that exist, I think about them in 4 categories. First, there's infrastructure, which is like your organizational structures and facilities. That also includes things like what tech you've adopted, what health insurance you offer. Then there's policies and procedures. That's things like, I think we've talked about, like attendance policies, leave policies today, bathroom breaks. And then it also includes things like listing standing and lifting as a job requirement, even though it's a desk job. My job, when I applied for it, had standing and lifting, and I have never once had to stand or lift for my job. I wouldn't have been able to get it, but listing it can exclude some people. And then there's the processes that you have to go through to get accommodations, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit more in depth. And I put those under policies and procedures. Then there's also culture, which all of these things are interlaced, right? What policies and procedures are built is based around the culture. So, this includes things like how the field, leaders, management, and coworkers frame and interact with disability. It can also include things like values of in-person interaction, values of eye contact for those of us who are autistic, like in panel 1 and myself. I don't make eye contact well. Values of knowing who should speak when. I'm perfectly fine to be told I'm interrupting, but sometimes I don't notice because I have a delay in processing audio information. And then unmet access needs is like sort of my class for all the actual individual things that are individualized to a person's disability experience that is a specific access need. So I'm going to use this example throughout because it literally just happened to me. My wife has started a new healthcare practice. She's a primary care provider, and she started a private practice. And the whole thing is designed around being disability, neurodiversity, and queer inclusive for patients. And we have these great non-fluorescent dimmable lights in all the patient rooms. And we just got a new building and it didn't have them at the nurse's station. And we just had a new employee start right away. And she got a migraine on her first day and had to go home. And my spouse realized that the lights might have contributed and asked, like, are these kinds of lights a migraine trigger for you? And they were. And so basically that night she went to Home Depot and she replaced all the lights with better versions. So that's like, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit, that was a retrofit because we bought the building that way, but you know, it's an unmet access need that person encountered that was specific to the structure of the building, its infrastructure, but it was related to that person's experience. But the issues of the retrofit, which is what my wife had to do, we didn't buy this building, but maybe if we ever buy it or build a building, we'll know to put good lights in at the beginning. But the issue is that retrofits, as put by Damage in this great book called Academic Ableism, he says retrofits address inequities and inaccessibility, but they do so in ways that reinforce ableism, turning disabled people into charity cases or villains instead of, you know, and they situate the grantor of access as the hero. So in this case, like, you know, it would be easy to frame my wife as like, oh, if she did this great thing, she went to the Home Depot the very night of this thing, and that makes her the hero. But really, it's like, you know, when we bought the building, we should have noticed that not only were the patient rooms a problem, the nurses station had these same, you know, potentially triggering lights in them. And we don't know what the disabilities of the employees might be, and they may or may not want to disclose them. So ideally, we would have put all the lights in originally, including in the nurses station. So also, we tend to build these around accommodations procedures. And I think somebody already pointed this out today, but they're really lengthy and they have a ton of requirements. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start right now that they're used as gatekeepers. You have to work while you wait for this to happen. So you're working without whatever it is that you need. Sometimes it takes a long time to get the documentation that a job requires because you might be waiting for your health insurance to kick in, because you can still do that for 90 days, not have health insurance. Then you need to go meet with a doctor. Where I live right now, the average primary care wait time with a new provider is 5 months in my city. That is ridiculous. So now that's 3 + 5 months that you are waiting to even go to the doctor to get your documentation. So, and at that time, you're supposed to be working a job and you may not have access at all, or you may not have full access, which just inherently puts you at a hiring disadvantage, a performance disadvantage, like all kinds of disadvantages. But ideally, if we build proactive procedures, you know, it goes beyond benefiting individuals with disabilities. So think about flexible scheduling. I have a flexible schedule. I literally came here from getting an infusion at an infusion center, but you know, flexible scheduling can benefit people with children. It can benefit caretakers of, you know, older parents. There's a lot of people who can benefit from this and can be contributing to your scientific, sorry, I say scientific, but I know this is academic advances. So I guess what I would ask is, if you go on to be a PI or head of a group or work as a manager, like how can we reframe approaches to disability from reactive to proactive, and then also from disbelief to belief? You know, we could ask an employee to prove that they have migraines, or we could just replace the lights, you know, like how much time and energy are you going to ask that employee to spend, and your own staff to spend, on verifying this disability, when we know that people underreport their disability because they're afraid of the consequences of discrimination if they do report? The literature bears out that very few people, you know, request an accommodation that they don't need. And in fact, most accommodation denials are done so that under review were not legal. So unfortunately, of course, these never go to court because it's very hard to get these things to court. So what I want you to think about now, though, is how do we reframe this in a very active strategy way? So if you're going to be an accomplice, we want to be proactive, but we're living in a retroactive world. So let's think about what variables you have control over. Maybe one day you become head of a cancer center and you can do something. Like my boss, who is head of the cancer center, and when I came to this job, I didn't have to bring documentation with me. We eventually got it done so that I had it in writing, but he granted me all my accommodations from literally the first day of my job. And we discussed it during my when he was recruiting me. And, that's the kind of power wielding that somebody in that level has. But maybe you're just a PI, and maybe you're just advocating to your boss, the head of the cancer center, what your graduate student needs or your postdoc needs. And then in your own lab policies, maybe you don't have an attendance policy. Maybe you have a flexible work from home policy. Maybe you're advocating that your PI adopt these things as a postdoc. Start from an assumption of belief. I think that's the thing I encounter most amongst professors. It's the most difficult thing about moving into a faculty role for me, which was very recent, was actually the amount of ableism I encounter in faculty towards students, and the things that are said behind closed doors about students with disabilities is extremely painful for me to hear, because it's very easy for me to empathize with the student and not the faculty members complaining about them. And I think the general assumption is that people are faking, and it's just false, especially because these students are often coming to me and giving me a much greater detailed version of the story than they are willing to tell their professors, because they're worried that their professors will wield it against them. And then, if you're in STEM, if you're in biomedical sciences, how can we move away from a pure medical model, pure cure mindset? And I think that comes from a lot of community engaged work, where we center the values of community members in our research design. I think this also applies in psychology research, of course, because of saneism. And there's a lot of psychology research that's problematic about autism. It probably applies in other fields too. I'm just not as familiar. So think about how that might apply in your own field, and then start from an assumption that you are coming from a subjective perspective. I don't care if you have a disability or not. I think we have to start decentering ourselves. We always think of academics as these neutral, beautifully neutral observers, but I assert that even if you're doing pure quantitative research, you are not a neutral observer. And the ways that we interpret our data and actually even design our studies are built around our viewpoints. And then finally, reflect on your positionality. Disabled perspectives can be expert perspectives. I think someone just barely touched on this. We call this epistemologies. That's your body knowledge of disability. And then lastly, we've already talked about this. Bonnie called it the publisher Paris culture. So how do we reframe positions, advancement, opportunities for people that are not so focused on that? What if, just saying, what if there could be part-time tenure track faculty that had a different tenure clock? They could still potentially bring in money. They're part-time, so they are, paid less, but potentially, but they could still work and they could still bring in an R01, and they could have different timelines. And how do we frame independence versus interdependence, especially in the American context? And how do we, interdependence being a value of disability justice, how do we honor contributions of people who aren't the quote unquote principal investigator or independent investigator? And how do we bring it back to we call it team science, but a team approach to science or to academia, and value collaboration and collective creativity? And then these are my sort of final reflections to you, which say, whose knowledge counts when we think about disability? is there really an objective observer? And should we have been treating all along this non-disabled viewpoint as objective in academia? Is there only one correct model of scholarly work? Lisa pointed out the hierarchical nature of our scholarly structures. Is that the only way? How do we redefine our cultural approach to disability in academia, both from a medical model reframing standpoint and just from like the productivity standpoint and all kinds of our culture things? And what does performing access proactively as an action look like? Sorry, I think I went like 5 minutes over my intended time, but here are all my sources, which I think will be available to you afterwards. We'll find a way to make them available, I think. So there are many. So I'm not going to go through them all. I want to leave this up. And I also want to thank all the previous speakers, because all of them have influenced my thinking at some point or another, including having gotten to present with some of them before. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mittendorf. And I know I'm sure MPA will find a way to share your resources. There are actually 34 resources, just to let people know, in their slides. So it's a wealth of experience. I want to thank both Dr. Yates and Dr. Mittendorf for their presentations and kick off our Q&A session. As a reminder, if you have specific questions for our presenters, please enter them using the Zoom Q&A function. If you don't see it right away, if it's not at the bottom of your screen, along with chat, it may be found under the More option. And the Q&A option honestly helps me to organize the questions better, because I've actually been recently diagnosed with adult ADHD that I'm still working through, trying to figure out, how to navigate that. But one way I am is I'm sitting in front of this laptop, and on the right, if you see me look to the side, I have two other screens, and the Q&A is on one and the chat is on the other. So I can try to manage myself. But I'm going to start with a few questions. And one, I actually asked both of the speakers earlier. So with the focus on accessibility and inclusion equity, what would the ideal higher education and/or workplace environment look like for people with disabilities?
Do you want to start, Lisa?
I was going to let you go since your mic is open. But
Okay.
no. Okay.
Go ahead.
Go. Okay. I will say, borrowing from some of what Kate discussed and my own experience, I'm a director of a disability support program who doles out accommodations. And I did it for years as a counselor, academic advisor, and autism specialist, and yada, yada, yada. And I know it's a stupid model. It's my job, and it's a stupid model. I think we need a new model for 21st century disability support. And accommodations don't support every kind of disability, especially neurodivergence. And I think that higher education needs to let go of this whole academic rigor thing. I actually Googled rigor because, I hear a lot from people, well, we can't compromise rigor. And like rigor means shivering and freezing cold. Or if we're talking about rigor mortis, it means stiff and unbending. Like, why is that our goal? Why is that our highest ideal of, the best college? So I think individual goals like IEPs, but for instructors, like things like that, those are the kind of things that I think we need to move toward. And it's going to require recreating the whole system, blowing up the system, or starting in small ways and, building on it. So I'll let Kate go.
It's funny that you said blowing up the system at the end, because I was going to say, can the answer be, like when you sent me that question, the thought that came into my head was, can the answer be burn it to the ground? Because I do think that, like you said, it's going to require like a complete restructuring of the system. And that's not to say that individual small actions are bad. In fact, I think we should continue with individual small actions, because until, like, sometimes there are things that you can do that just make things better for one person. And if you make, you know, you don't want to make the perfect be the enemy of the good, as the saying goes. But I think you do want to think about ways in which the system was inherently built not for us. It was built, not only was it built not for us, it was built to exclude us, right? So I think, you know, like many systemic structures that are built to exclude, like systemic racist structures, we need to think about whether the system serves everyone that we think it's serving in the 21st century. And if it's not, we got to figure out a way to start over. And maybe we're independently making small improvements to a completely misdesigned system while we do that, just to keep people being able to survive that system. But we have to think about, how do we build it again and build it anew? And what does it take to do that?
And I would just add, you know, in my research on disability perception in higher education, I find that the most change happens when people have a conversation. So having conversations with people who are managing disabilities or disabled individuals to just kind of learn about their experience. And in my dissertation, some of my participants were like, I asked a question. Do you find that, I can't remember the question, but about the best way, one of my students with disabilities who was blind said that if we are willing to teach, they are willing to learn. And I asked, that's what he got from this event that we held. And I asked my participants how they felt about that, because that was my way of including somebody with a disability in the study. So many of them said, no, 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 that's wrong, wrong, wrong. It's not their responsibility to teach us. We need to learn. We need to research. We need to. And so then I changed it and I said, okay, let me ask it this way. Is this true for you based on your experience at the event? I was able to learn because they were willing to teach. And they said, oh yeah, for sure. So having the conversation made them change how they implemented their classroom practices. Just having a conversation. So we're talking about postdocs with disabilities, having coworkers who are masking and assimilating and spending all this energy, right, trying to appear normal, letting them be themselves, and then having a conversation with them about, how does it feel like when you're having to mask, and, you know, inviting them to participate, even if they don't have the energy for it, giving them the opportunity to say no or yes, you know, that kind of thing.
Thank you. And I'm going to switch. I'm going to ask another question first. So in our current climate and going forward, how do you think institutions and workplaces can ensure the DEI inclusion efforts include accessibility issues?
Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm in California. We are DEI everything, right? And I know that a lot of colleges are losing that because of our current climate or whatever. But in 2023, the Chancellor's Office added an A for accessibility to their DEI framework, the California Community College. So disability, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I went and presented at a DEIA conference, and I was so excited, right? Sorry, I did not present. I attended. That was another conference I presented at. But I went and attended. I was so excited to see, you know, what they were going to say about disabilities. They had one session over the course of 4 days on UDL. And in that UDL, all they did was talk about how the language they're changing the language from teacher-centered to student-centered, which is, you know, yay. And then they had a session on accessibility, which I did not attend because I thought, I'm a disability support director. I've got that piece of information. But people who did attend told me that several people in there said, this is ridiculous that this is the only time you're talking about accessibility. And what I found is when they talked about accessibility, they were talking about accessibility for all. So accessibility for racially marginalized people, accessibility for LGBTQ. We thought in the field that accessibility meant, yay, people with disabilities are on the table or at the table, right? No, it was just access, another thing that I see happening is before the pandemic, UDL was highly resistant, right? A lot of teachers did not want to participate and engage in it. Since the pandemic, a lot of them are now equating UDL with distance education. They think it's been fixed because we have distance education and people have software on their computers. And so UDL is not a problem anymore. And I heard that several times at this DEIA conference. And I was like, wait, but UDL is still needed. It hasn't gone away. The need is still here. And it's not distance education. Sorry, I'll get off my horse now.
That's okay. Kate, before I jump to you, Lisa, for anyone who doesn't know, can you let us know what UDL stands for?
Universally designed learning. And it's universally designed learning environments, but it also includes, and people forget this part, it also includes assessment. So allowing students to understand, receive their knowledge in the way that the format that works best for them, but also allowing them to express their knowledge in the way that works best for them. And, a lot of teachers just want to do little, Scantron sheets, and that's the way you express your knowledge, or essay writing, when maybe a video is the best way for you to express your knowledge. Maybe a rap song is the best way for you to express your knowledge. And so just trying to meet students where they are and design, like Kate said, if we had the design, we wouldn't need the accommodations, right? Or we wouldn't need all of the accommodations. Allowing them to express and creating learning environments that are universally designed, like the curbs in the street, the flattened curbs in the street.
Kate?
Can you remind me the question? Because I was so focused on Lisa's answer.
No, the question was, in our current climate going forward, how do you think institutions and workplaces can ensure the DEI inclusion efforts include accessibility issues? So as Lisa said, DEIA.
Yeah, so actually this is an interesting question because I live and work from Washington State, which is also quite great for DEIA, etc. But my institution is in Tennessee, where we're not allowed to call things DEI. So we have to be quite careful. But that doesn't mean we aren't building new inroads for people with disabilities to succeed, or other types of marginalizations. You can work on these things, I guess, under you need leadership that understands that these things are important for the success of the whole workplace. So you can work on these things in this type of climate where maybe you're not allowed to call something specifically DEIA. You can work on it under, this is a success of the whole work environment viewpoint. And that is the viewpoint that my boss takes, which is, I think, a great one. And so we are evaluating it in terms of the quality of our workforce, which really a scientific workforce that is able to address many types of questions and to experience a good workforce culture is made up of diverse individuals who report good cultural experiences in the workplace. And so one of the things that he's been really great at doing is just building committees to seek feedback on barriers to positive workplace experience, barriers to positive workplace culture. And that has, included him, including me. I serve on these committees in terms of, pointing out places where things could be more accessible. And like one example is just after COVID, they stopped making some of the seminars and stuff available on Teams, and they were only in person. But actually, that didn't just exclude people with disabilities like myself who have a permanent work from home accommodation. A lot of doctors are like running between clinics and stuff like that, and they could attend for half the seminar, but only if it was available on Teams. And so really, it actually opened up the learning environment to lots of people when he made it a policy that we would go back to hybrid presentations. So it wasn't, maybe all the attendees are disabled, but they're not open about it if they are. But I suspect a lot of them are attending, between clinics or on their lunch break and things like that. So, I think it opens the accessibility to more. And as you said, they frame it as accessibility to all, but I think, Ben is very intentional about making sure that disabled perspectives are represented in that all. So even if you have to frame something as accessibility for all, you can make sure that all, the ALL, all people are included in that, so it's not impossible to do this work in the political climate that we find ourselves in.
Thank you. And we are close to time, but I wanted to point out Alberto's question in the chat. And they asked, are there any national disabled in STEM communities or organizations that you can recommend for support? They've not been able to find any as exists for women, race, etc. populations. And the plug is that they're nonprofits, diversity and STEM community analysis under www.minoritypostdoc.org/stakeholders. Is there, I know Kate put into the chat a whole link to their resources. I know we have a graduate student and postdoc council under our roundtable on mentorship, wellbeing, and professional development that's designed for graduate students and postdocs. And one of our council members created Disabled in STEM. You can find it on Twitter. I refuse to say X. So that is one specifically for people with disabilities, for graduate students with disabilities. If anyone else knows of any, please put them in the chat. Lisa's saying that you haven't researched them, but they are out there. Kate, do you have any?
Yeah, so this is specific to people in computing, but there's SIG Access. They actually have a ton of resources that I link on my website. They build resources that are great. They have like resources on making an accessible conference, resource on making, but they're basically, I always forget what SIG stands for, special interest group, I think.
Special interest.
I think there's an NSGC one too for people who are genetic counselors. I teach in the genetic counseling program, which is why I know that too. There's some sort of disability one in SIG and NSGC. A lot of professional organizations that are specific to, I think AMIA has one as well, the American Medical Informatics Association. So a lot of professional organizations that are specific to your discipline may have a SIG that you could join. And then this is SIG Access's website. So if you're in computing, either in academia or industry, you can actually join SIG Access. So I think they have some great stuff going on. And then I think there's some work on accessibility of like health IT solutions that are going on in HL7 working group as well for people who are in informatics. But like I said, these are all specialized to field. I don't know of any like broad category things beyond the disabled in STEM group that you already mentioned for grad students. Although I will say that I follow them and I've presented at their stuff before and have been featured on their page. So like, it's not just for graduate students. I think also you could connect with graduate students to be a mentor probably through that if you're a postdoc. And the one final thing I'll mention is, you know, I think mentorship goes both ways. I've mentored many students with disabilities, and I learn from them probably as much as they learn from me. So I do think there's value in maybe connecting with disabled in STEM, even if you're not a graduate student. And especially if you decide that you want to work with graduate students, you know, so.
Thank you. Before we move to our final session, let's collectively thank Dr. Mittendorf and Dr. Yates for their vast experience, their wisdom, and their wonderful presentations that they shared with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Melissa, and to all of our panelists. Just fantastic work that we did today. So I very much appreciated. It's an enriching discussion, I think, on the hopeful ways that we can move forward after we heard some about our barriers. And we know that those pathways aren't easy. Just reflecting on what you shared, from misunderstandings to intentional roadblocks, I think overcoming those barriers and trying to achieve better success, coming through a range of actions, from changing perspectives, holding candid conversations, and the power of opportunity by tapping into our allies and community. We can all find ways to thrive, but some of them come with more challenges along the way than others. We have one more session today, which is our interactive workshop. If you pre-registered, there's a separate Zoom link. There was a separate registration required just to keep the number of attendees manageable. If you haven't registered and you enjoyed all those sessions today, would like to re-up for a 4th-hour session, I'm going to drop the Zoom link in the chat if you'd like to join us. But thank you again to our panelists and our moderators for taking the time out, not just today, but starting back at the beginning of this year when we launched the concept of this Equity Summit for 2024. Thank you also to Sarah and Stephanie, our ASL interpreters. I know you're going to be joining us for the 4th hour, but thank you. And thanks all of you as attendees for making this conversation rich. And I hope you enjoyed and feel empowered with new knowledge and perspectives after these panels. Feel free to let me know how the NPA continue to enrich the postdoctoral community. I'll drop my email in the chat as well. So thank you very much. I hope we'll see you in the 4th hour if you are interested.